Bibliotherapist to the rescue. I am a book superhero. Tonight's session is all about rescue, rescues in literature and rescues by literature. I am going to be talking about my favourite rescues in literature, and I'd love to know if you have any particular favourites too. Let me just show off my fabulous superhero cloak and imagine that I'm flying through the sky, bringing you books of all kinds that will rescue you from sadness, rescue you from boredom, rescue you from ordinariness, rescue you from the doldrums, and rescue you from your own mind. Now, I probably can't actually see very well because this was admittedly improvised quite rapidly at the last minute. So I might have to take off my mask and show you who I really am in a minute. Lovely to see lots of people joining. Do tell me while you're coming in if you've got favourite rescues in literature from childhood books or from grown-up books. They could be literal rescues or they could be metaphorical rescues. They could be rescues of the mind or rescues of the body and soul. Jonathan, lovely to see you. Gillibird, lovely to see you. And Small Spark Lucy, lovely to see you. Great to see lots of people joining. And I do think I'm not going to be able to keep this mask on for very long, but I am enjoying being a superhero bibliotherapist, bringing you books to rescue you from all kinds of issues. Oh, that's better. Now I can see, because I'm going to need to do some reading. So the idea of this theme, which is all about rescue this evening, came to me because I was rescued the other night by the AA. This has been a common theme in my life. Many a time have me and my husband been rescued by the AA. And on this occasion, I was driving on my own back from Bristol, where I'd just been dropping off my daughter. And suddenly I found the car not responding to any foot control. The clutch completely disappeared. And I was veering all over the M25. I was near Heathrow. It was a terrifying scenario. So I nipped into the hard shoulder, very close to a sign that was saying Terminal 5 on the motorway, massive motorway with 5 lanes. And there I awaited rescue. iPhone the AA, we are long-standing members. We have definitely earned our membership with them and paid for it many times over by the millions of times we've been rescued. I did have to wait for an hour and a half. And while I was waiting for rescue for an hour and a half, I started thinking about different types of rescue in literature. And while I was thinking about it, I thought it's such a common and enormous theme in books, particularly in children's books, being rescued. But then when it came to looking for the books and finding examples, there weren't 1,000 of them to be found, which is why I'd love your thoughts and your comments if you have favourite rescue books from childhood or from now. So one of the first ones that did come to mind, which I think is a classic rescue book, is 101 Dalmatians by Dodie Smith, which I'm sure that many of you know and love, whether it's from the film or from the book. If you haven't yet read the book, I would urge you to do so. Trying to get the cat in the picture, but she doesn't want to come in. It's an amazingly brilliant book, and as I'm sure you know, it's all about the two doggy parents rescuing their 101 puppies from Cruella de Vil. And it's an absolutely rollicking, gripping story. and in fact, one of my favourite books. I'm just going to see if I can actually see that book on my shelf, but I don't know if it's going to quickly come to hand. And this is where you see that my amazing organisation of my books doesn't always seem to work. So 101 Dalmatians, that's one of the first ones that comes to mind as a rescue book. When you start thinking about rescue books and you start going into search engines, libraries, and talking to people about rescue books, there's a whole host of books called search and rescue books. And one of the key writers of these currently is a lady called Katie Ruggles, who also, by the way, writes erotica and romantic fiction. And her rescue books have names like Hold Your Breath and Under the Ice. And they are really fun rescue books, which I have to say are just great adventures, which I would thoroughly recommend if that's the kind of rescue book you like. So some people love to read a good old-fashioned rescue adventure story. I bet there's a few people out there that do. Give me a wave if you are one of those people that loves a good old-fashioned rescue book. Other people prefer books that are more deep, in depth, and have more emotional depth. But Katie Ruggles, I'll just tell you a little bit about her first rescue book called Hold Your Breath, which is the first of a series of 20. In the remote Rocky Mountains, lives depend on the search and rescue brotherhood. But in a place this far off the map, trust is hard to come by and secrets can be murder. As the captain of Field Country's ice rescue dive team, Callum Cook is driven to perfection. But when he meets new diver Louise Lou Sparks, all that hard-won order is obliterated in an instant. Lou is a hurricane, a walking disaster, and with her, he's never felt more alive, even if keeping her safe might just kill him. So that is Hold Your Breath by Katie Ruggles. I feel like while I'm talking about these rescue books, I need to be very active because I am being a bibliotherapist coming to your rescue. That's B for books, B for bibliotherapy, B for Bella, which is also my name, Isabella Ella. So this is a book, Hold Your Breath by Katie Ruggles, set in the Rocky Mountains. And it is a really fun rescue read, all about the captain of Field County's ice rescue dive team, Callum Cook. What I do love about the book as well is that Katie Ruggles, who is the author, decided to write about what she actually knew. She lived in an off-grid solar and wind-powered house in the Rocky Mountains until her family lured her back to Minnesota. Apparently, when she's not writing, Katie rides horses, trains her 3 dogs, cross-country skis, and travels to places where she can scuba dive. A graduate of the police academy, Katie received her ice rescue certification and can attest that the reservoirs in the Colorado mountains really are that cold. So that's Katie Ruggles. She also has a great rugged name, and she is clearly someone who would be brilliant at rescuing people herself, like me, the bibliotherapist, coming to your rescue with books. And one of the books in my repertoire for rescue is the Moomin books by Tove Jansson, which anyone that's been to my sessions before knows are some of my favourite ever books. And they are definitely a brilliant example of the healing power of bibliotherapy. Now, so those are a classic bunch of rescue books, which are, oh no, my bee's fallen off. That would have just been confusing to you then. That is my B for bibliotherapy. I am Bella, the bibliotherapist rescuer. I'm going to put that back on my cloak while I speak, because otherwise I'll just feel a bit strange not being a rescuer. By the way, while you're here, do tell me if you have any particular ailments that you need rescuing from, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to give you books to rescue you from the doldrums. I am the bibliotherapist superhero this evening, rescuing you from all kinds of issues. That is my plan, that is my mission, that's what I want to do this evening. So do tell me if you have any particular ailments, worries, woes that you need some book therapy to rescue you from. And meanwhile, I will tell you about other rescue books. So I started off with some classic rescue books which are about being rescued from terrible situations, which could be for kids, could be for young adults, could be for adults, which are by Katie Ruggles. And there's a whole raft of such books. But then another type of rescue book, which is a classic genre, are books set in the Holocaust and talking about Jewish children and adults being rescued from the Nazis. And one of my favourite examples of this genre is Number the Stars by Lois Lowry, which is an absolute classic. Lois Lowry is an amazing writer who wrote The Giver, which is one of my favourite books of all time, both for adults and for children. If you haven't read The Giver, read that immediately. It's a very beautiful, beautifully written book, and one that gives you hope, because it starts off in a situation of no hope. I won't tell you too much about it because that's a digression. But Number the Stars takes place in the capital of Denmark, Copenhagen, in the Second World War. It's set when the Nazis occupied this country and the Jewish people were being moved to the concentration camps. Some of them tried to escape out of Denmark with the help of non-Jewish Danish people. And the book is all about how Jewish people were aided and abetted by ordinary Danish people. The main characters in this book, Number the Stars, are Anne-Marie and Ellen, who are best friends, 10 years old. It's a children's book. Ellen and her family are in serious danger. Thankfully, Anne-Marie's family helped them. So this is about a non-Jewish family helping a Jewish girl. And it's a really beautiful, fantastic, lovely, deeply moving, profound book. And I bet you know a few others of that genre. There's a lot of fantastic books about children escaping from the Nazis, such as Once by Maurice Gleitzman, which is a really fantastic book, which you must definitely also read. He wrote a whole series of them: Once, Then, Now, Later. And they're very short. They're written for kids, probably 9 and up. And I wouldn't call them rescue books because they follow in the footsteps of a particular boy escaping the Nazis. But he's not being rescued, he's actually rescuing himself. And that is another direction that I'm not going to go in tonight. Books that rescue, all about rescuing yourself. That's a whole different world that we could talk about another time. Colleen, great to see you. Lovely to see you joining me on Facebook. Do put in any comments, any thoughts, any questions. You can do it privately by messaging me, or you can do it on Instagram as a public comment. I'd love to know if anyone has any questions or comments about the idea of rescue in literature, or if anyone needs to be rescued from an emotional state that I can help with a book. Let me know, and I'd love to try and help. So another amazing, brilliant rescue book, which I'm sure you will all be familiar with to some degree, is The Princess Bride by William Goldman, which is an absolute classic read. It's not too long. It's utterly gripping, and it's got everything in it you could possibly desire. There's actually a great review on Amazon by an anonymous reviewer, which I'm just going to read you a little section of because I love the way that he describes, if it's he, I'm not sure, reading The Princess Bride. He says, if you haven't read this book, then all I can tell you is to go out, get it, and read it. Don't bother with the rest of this review. You'll thank me later. I like his style. Oh, I might suddenly slightly run out of battery, so be aware. I might have to suddenly plug in and rescue my phone. This book has, according to our lovely reviewer, fencing, fighting, torture, poison, true love, hate, revenge, giants, hunters, good men, bad men, beautifulest ladies, snakes, spiders, beasts of all natures and descriptions, pain, death, brave men, coward men, strongest men, chases, escapes, lies, truths, passion, miracles, for a start. They go on to say it's one of the greatest love, action, revenge stories ever abridged by a modern author. And for anyone that's read the book, it has a really great idea, which is that the original story that this is based on was written by the immortal S. Morgenstern, which Goldman claims was a bit too dry for the public's enjoyment. So he wrote a simpler version of it. But of course, it's all a gag and it's all an ironic concept that there never was an original version of this book. There never was an S. Morgenstern, the greatest of the Florinese writers. And Goldman claims that he was read the stories of this Morgenstern when he was a kid. And he also claims that his father simplified the stories to make them much better for him and much more fun. So he pretends that he's rewriting the stories, and actually it's all completely untrue. He made up the entire idea, but it's a story about a story, and it's also about how the way that a story can affect a young mind, because in the book Goldman keeps talking about how the experience of reading the story when he was a kid completely made him into the character that he is today. So he makes the comment constantly through the book that you are what you read, and what you read as a child or as a teenager will have an enormous and profound effect on you for the rest of your life. So that is wise words from Mr. Goldman. I think I'm going to go back into superhero mode just for a little bit, so as to entertain you with my fantastic mask. I'll see if I can read successfully with this on. So that's The Princess Bride, which is one enormous rescue mission. And if you haven't read it, I thoroughly recommend it. Then moving on, so many exciting books to discuss. Let's just talk about The Martian by Andy Weir, which is a fantastic rescue book. It's all about a man, Mark Watney, who is stuck on Mars. He's the last person, the only person on Mars, when everyone from his mission leaves him by accident on Mars, thinking that he's actually dead. But he's not. And lots of you might have seen the film. It is a really great film, which is very closely based on the novel, by the way. But if you haven't read the book, it's a really excellent read. It's got a lot of science in it. It's quite full on in its science. And it's also very funny and very irreverent. Mark Watney has some really great phrases saying things like, I'm going to fuck the science out of this situation. And he does indeed manage to save himself from certain death by managing to create oxygen, managing to grow food in a hostile environment. he's luckily brought some potatoes. They brought some potatoes from Earth, which he then manages to seed and grow with some soil that he also bought from Earth. There's a lot of amazing technical detail, which I will not attempt to go into, but it begins with it being a story about him rescuing himself from certain death, but then it also becomes a story of the NASA scientists on Earth trying to rescue him from afar and seeing what they can do, because they initially don't realize that he's still alive. Then they realize he is, and they think, how the hell are we going to get him out of this situation? So they also have to work with the Chinese, and it becomes a rather wonderful story of how the nations work together to save this one man left on Mars. And it's very much a feel good story full of hope, and it's a massive rescue mission. So that is a positive and joyous rescue story. However, another book, which I think I left downstairs annoyingly, is The Lord of the Flies, which is an amazingly fabulous, brilliant, gripping book, which is so famous that many people know the concept, know the story, know the idea, but haven't actually read the book. If you haven't read the book, read it now. It's, you all know the story, I'm sure, about a group of boys who are kids from an English boarding school who are on an enormous trip in an aeroplane. Can't actually remember what the purpose of the trip was, but I think it's something sporty. And their plane goes down, they land on an island, and then they have to fend for themselves for the next couple of hundred pages. And William Golding made this story into an exploration of what happens to civilization when kids are left to their own devices. Not necessarily just kids, but adults might be the same in his view. So he has two main figures, Jack and Ralphie, who take slightly different attitudes to what they ought to do in the face of having no adults with them. One of them, Ralph, is the more, in a way, the more civilized, who is obsessed with trying to be rescued. So he is obsessed with keeping the fires burning so that people will see them, and he thinks it all through. If he keeps the fires burning, then if they ever get a sense of people coming to rescue them, then they should throw on lots of wet twigs to get lots of smoke going into the air, because smoke will be their savior. Whereas Jack is the one that becomes a bit more savage, and they actually have the savages. They call themselves the savages, and then it all goes quite dark for people that know the book. I won't give too many spoilers, but they start hunting the wild boar that live on the island, and then there seems to be a sense that they might start hunting each other, and things do get darker and darker. And there's a lot of questions in the book about how important is rescue, how might they get rescued, would they actually be quite happy never to be rescued, and how important are their civilized ways that they try to hang on to and don't necessarily succeed. I think it's not a mega spoiler to say that they do eventually get rescued. I'm sure that most of you will know the story anyway. And when they are rescued, it's a very bittersweet moment, because there's been a lot of tragedy on the way to that moment. So it's not all happiness when the rescue finally comes. So that's, in a way, a slightly darker side of the rescue concept. Other children's books in which rescue is a major theme include The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, which is a really fantastic and amazing, brilliant collection of stories. Again, read them if you haven't already. And they are books in which 4 children go through a kind of portal into another land, Narnia, which I'm sure all of you readers will know well. And when they get to Narnia, there's a lamppost, there's snow, there's everything that's been frozen, everything is in a state of perpetual frozen summer. And there's also an ice queen. And one of the brothers gets trapped by the Snow Queen, and the other siblings have to go and rescue him. That's what it's all about. But there's quite a lot of other rescues going on in the book. Aslan is also a kind of symbol of possible holiness. Is he perhaps a Jesus figure? Many people think. And he also gets rescued at one point in the book in a very symbolic way. So there's a lot of different types of rescues going on. And I would very much urge you to give it a go and get out your rescue outfits to go into Narnia and rescue Edmund with the other brothers and sisters. Another collection of books which involve fantastic rescues is Philip Pullman's The Subtle Knife and The Northern Lights, and which make The Golden Compass. So the Northern Lights trilogy. These are really superb, brilliant rescue books. It's a trilogy all about Lyra Balakwa, who starts off the book. She's a young girl. She's probably about 11, 12 at the beginning of the book. And she realizes quite early on in the book that her best friend, Roger, has been taken by the gobblers. And we slowly discover, as the book goes on, who the gobblers are. They are a terrifying, rather evil band of people led by Mrs. Coulter. I'm not going to give you too many spoilers because it is a really exciting book. Lulu the cat really wants to get involved, but she just won't quite come onto my lap. I think she might be slightly freaked out by my exciting rescue outfit because, believe it or not, I don't wear it all the time, although I obviously should, as Ella, the bibliotherapist rescuer. Is my letter still there? Yes, it is. B for books, B for bibliotherapy, B for Bella. Isabella is my full name. So, Philip Pullman's Northern Lights trilogy are all about rescues. Initially, Lyra is heading to the north, to Svalbard, where she wants to rescue her best friend, Roger. And this is an instance of the idea of rescue books, which I find particularly fascinating, in which rescues don't actually quite happen. There are some books where the whole thing is about trying to rescue someone, but the rescue doesn't actually occur. And I'm not going to tell you why in this instance, but as the book goes on and as the trilogy continues, this is the second in the series, I do believe, or is it the third? Suddenly having a blank on that. It's the second. Many different rescues are happening. Lyra tries to rescue Roger. Then she meets a boy called Will, and they need to kind of rescue each other in various ways. There's also Lyra's amazing rescue of Yorick Burnison, the polar bear, which is an incredibly cool rescue because she has to use wit and cunning rather than strength, physical strength, in order to rescue a giant armoured bear. I wonder if any of you have been watching the TV series. I did watch the first series and loved it. Haven't been so keen on the second series, I have to admit. However, Colleen, you say you've seen the movie, not read the book. I'm guessing you're talking about this, The Northern Lights, but let me know if I'm wrong. I'd so recommend these books if you haven't read them. I was actually recommended them first by my godfather, lovely Peter, who sometimes watches these sessions. And he read these books, I think, probably when he was in his 60s. And he absolutely loved them, told me I had to read them. And I adored them too. They're great for all ages. They are supposedly young adult, but they're just brilliant for adults. They're also great to read aloud to another adult or to a child. They're really exciting, brilliantly written, very beautiful, great vocab, and you are on the edge of your seat throughout the whole thing. So, rescues that don't quite work, I've got a few more of them coming. But I also just wanted to go back to science fiction. That a common trope in science fiction is rescuing people from the depths of despair, possibly in a spaceship when they're running out of air, a bit like in The Martian by Andy Weir. But an early precursor to that is Arthur C. Clarke's A Fall of Moondust, which I think was written in 1955. Um, and this is a great book that describes the surface of the moon as if it has seas on top of it, and as if the dust that settles on the surface of the moon becomes a sea which you might accidentally fall into and be immersed under. And I'll just read you a little bit that introduces the idea of what happens in A Fall of Moondust by Arthur C. Clarke, one of the greatest science fiction writers. Sorry about that. That was my phone telling me I'm going to run out of battery. I have to plug it in a minute. One of the greatest science fiction writers ever. For a million years, the bubble had been growing like a vast abscess below the root of the mountains. Now the abscess was about to burst. Captain Harris had left the controls on autopilot and was talking to the front row of passengers as the first tremor shook the boat. For a fraction of a second, he wondered if a fan blade had hit some submerged obstacle. Then, quite literally, the bottom fell out of his world. So this is Arthur C. Clarke's A Fall of Moondust, when there's a group of people on the moon going on a kind of boat trip on the moon over a lake covered in moondust. It fell slowly, as all things must upon the moon. The sea was alive and moving. Every stage of that nightmare transformation was pitilessly illuminated by the earth light, until the crater was so deep that its firewall was completely lost in shadow, and it seemed as if Selene were racing into a curving crescent of utter blackness, an arc of annihilation. In the darkness and in silence, they were sinking into the moon. So it's a classic rescue situation as the boat goes underneath the surface of a lake on the moon full of people. Can they be rescued? That's what the book is all about. While we ponder that terrible scene, I would love to know if you have any thoughts of books about rescue, which are your favourite rescue books, and whether you, when you think of that idea, do you think about the idea of rescue in the way that I'm describing, like being rescued from a terrible situation physically, or are you thinking about emotional rescue? Ponder that while I just sort out my phone, and I will also keep talking while I do that. Um, Technology is just not with me because I'm going to have to unplug and then replug in, and then I'm just not going to be in such a good place. That is the problem. There we go. Now we're plugged in, and now I'm looking like a really scary nun in a rather dark position. So I'm just going to bring the laptop round as well. Sorry about this, guys. Today has been a day of not amazingly brilliant organisation, so I'm not quite so on it with my books being to hand. Here we go. So just getting a couple more books. Oh dear, showing the phone and the Facebook picture. Um, so yeah, anyone got any questions? Anyone got any rescue questions? Do you need to be rescued from any particular situations? Let me know if you do. Another amazing, brilliant rescue book is The Fell by Sarah Moss, which came out quite recently and it was written soon after lockdown. And it's actually paused due to poor connection. Sorry about that. Don't know what's going on there. It actually talks about different. I'm gonna. Sorry about this. My connection seems to be bad now that I've moved. That's annoying, isn't it? Darn, everything's going pear-shaped. I need rescuing from bad Wi-Fi. Sarah Moss, brilliant book. I'm going to be brief. I'm going to start going a bit more speedily. So this is written in a lockdown situation. It's about a woman who is in lockdown. She's living near the Fell in the north of England. I think she's in Yorkshire. And she decides to break her lockdown when she really shouldn't. And she goes out off on a walk on the Fell when she's meant to be staying in. And she has an accident. And she then awaits rescue for most of the book. And this makes it actually a very exciting read as you wait with her and you go through the problems that she goes through during this long wait. This connection is really annoying me. Constance's story says yay for me. Cloud Cuckoo Land. Sorry, I'm really making a mess of all of this. Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Durr had an interesting story of rescue in it. I haven't read that yet. Thank you so much for that, because I'm actually dying to read that. And I know it's going to be brilliant because I loved All the Light We Cannot See. So that is a great recommendation. Thank you. I'm going to try and read that next on my list. So The Fell, Story of Rescue, fully recommend that. It's a very subtle, brilliantly written book, which, now I'm showing you bad aspects of my room. This is all just going a bit pear-shaped this evening. Sorry, guys. That's what happens when you're a biblio superhero. So now I just want to talk a little bit about a rescue that doesn't happen. Death of a River Guide by Richard Flanagan. The title gives away what happens in this book. He never does get rescued. He does indeed die. We're told that in the title. But it's an amazing book, which I would utterly recommend as a fantastic read. Al-Jazz has only taken on his job to help out an acquaintance, having recently returned to Tasmania. His father has just died and he's alone in the world with nothing to tie him down. He's being paid badly and the river trip that he's going on is poorly equipped. So he is a river guide, but he hasn't done it for ages. He's out of condition. He shouldn't really be doing it, but he said yes because he's being nice and he doesn't have anything else to do. However, he's got nothing else going on in his life. He's drifted through the years without any particular goals recently, and then he drifts into this final job, determined to do the decent thing by his clients. But this book is all written as Al-Jazz lies under the water on the verge of death, and he tells 3 stories as he lies there. One is his own story, beginning with his birth in Italy, moving forward in time from his parents through his relationship with the enigmatic Kuta Ho from another generation of immigrants, and the loss of their child Gemma to the ill-fated river rafting expedition that is happening right now, and his imminent death. Then the second story, so that's his story, is the story of the rafting expedition itself. And the final story is one that comes to him in flashes and visions, which send him travelling back and forth over time. So it's three interwoven stories, and visions assail Al-Jaz as he begins to realise that the origins that he thought he came from are not quite true. So his understanding and perception of himself changes even as he lies on the verge of death under the water. And it is an amazing book. This is Death of a River Guide by Richard Flanagan, a story of a man who never does get rescued. He's occasionally hoping that there might be rescue, but it becomes increasingly apparent that there won't be. So that's a book which is not a happy ending. And Colleen, thanks for telling me your comment was about Lord of the Flies. Colleen, if you haven't read the book, you've got to read it. It is an amazing book, The Lord of the Flies. It's one which a lot of people here probably had to read at school, and that could have put them off. But also, if you did read it at school, it means that you would have got a lot more insight into it because it has a lot of amazing depth and layers and symbols. It's a book to take quite slowly because it's written quite evocatively with lots of wonderful metaphors and lots of really interesting spiritual concepts as well. The Lord of the Flies, is the Lord of the Flies the devil? Or is the Lord of the Flies simply a pig's head covered in flies? It's a brilliant book. Definitely read it, or maybe try listening to it as an audiobook if you don't fancy actually reading it. So yeah, rescue stories in which the person does get rescued in the end, such as The Martian by Andy Weir, obviously fill us with a sense of fulfillment, happiness, and positivity, because it's a happy ending where everything is right with the world at the end. And actually, even The Fell, which is a more thought-provoking, thoughtful, and roundabout kind of book, does also come with an upbeat ending. Don't want to tell you too much about it. But there are, of course, also books about rescue where the rescue doesn't necessarily happen. And then, as I said earlier, there's books in which the hero or heroine is rescuing themselves, such as Room by Emma Donoghue, which is a fantastic book too, which I would hugely recommend, in which a woman is trapped inside a shed where she's been kept for over 5 years by a man who is sexually abusing her on a daily basis. And she devises a way to rescue herself. And I don't want to give too much away about the book, but in a way, she is also rescued by her son. And that is a really fantastic rescue story of sorts. But I think I'm going to devote another session, another day, to books in which people rescue themselves. So, on that merry note, I'm going to leave you for this evening because it's all been going slightly pear-shaped with my technology. Sorry about that, with the Wi-Fi and the lack of battery power. But next week, I'm going to talk about holes in literature. That is because I've been driving over so many potholes. Is this a phenomenon that you've all noticed yourselves? Is the world covered in potholes at the moment? So that got me thinking about holes in literature, holes in stories, be they physical or be they metaphorical. So do join me next week for Holes in Literature. And in the meantime, if you have any thoughts about rescues in literature that I haven't touched on, I'd love to know your thoughts and ideas. So thanks so much for joining me this evening again, Colleen. Lovely to see you again. And thanks everyone else that joined. Thank you, Yay for me, for the suggestion of Cloud Cuckoo Land, which I'm definitely going to read in the near future. And anyone that hasn't read Philip Pullman, read him now. He's amazing. Lord of the Flies, read that too. Narnia, obviously. Princess Bride, so many amazing rescue books to read. And I'm sure millions that I haven't actually mentioned, as well as 101 Dalmatians. Don't forget that for one of the best, brilliant rescue books of all time, which is a great one for reading at any time of life, not just for kids. And anyone that just needs general rescue literature in the sense of being rescued, maybe from the doldrums, needing a bit of a pick-me-up. The Moomins, they're always going to rescue from a little bit of sadness. But do, if you want to send me any comments or thoughts or questions, do please drop me a line, send me a message. Trying to get a grip on what on earth I'm doing with my laptop. See you next week. Thanks for joining me. Good night. Oop.